more from the Zendo manual, and they have a section on community, and quoting them, they say, "Stories are sacred. Remind an individual that their stories are important, not just for them, but for the collective." And I've talked about that to myself a lot. Creating a community culture where we share our visions and revelations with each other is profound and necessary, not just for the individual, but also for their community. We encourage our guests to connect with and build supportive communities around themselves when they return home from the event. Imagine if after a person went through a crisis, there was a community of people really interested in learning what their revelations were and what their insights were and what their visions were. And that's why I've said to myself, it'd be cool if we share that with each other, because there's already millions of us who have had these experiences that we could be talking more with each other, and then that ripples out. Because oftentimes, even if we have friends who have also been through the mental health system and have been labeled and things, it's, how are you doing? Oh, you had a med change recently and all that, which is fine, but we don't talk about our visions. We don't talk about what we really experienced that much. And we don't talk about it in terms of curiosity and exploration. If we do mention it, it's a guilty, oops, I don't know if I should have said that. I know that's weird type stuff, or that's a symptom, things like that. We're not really talking about them in healthy and healing and curious and wondrous ways. And in the manual, they also have a section on embodiment, which is interesting because it says it's relatively easy to ingest a substance and have a mind-altering experience. The real work begins when we try to carry what we have learned back to our daily lives and communities. And the same thing pertains to when we have an involuntary psychedelic experience of extended duration or a non-volitional altered state. It's how can we carry what we learned into our life? And that's why I say harvest, practice, embody. And for me, self-dialogue is a way that I talk about what I've learned and what I'm learning with myself. And they say embodiment is the process of integrating knowledge, wisdom, and experience into the fabric of one's being. It's the process whereby ideas become actual beliefs, practices, and behavior. So I've talked a lot about how these states change behavior and how we get new traits and skills and how we might be able to use that as a blueprint to inform what we might practice as ourselves moving forward. So they're saying this exact same thing in the framework of taking a psychedelic, but it's never framed that way. When somebody gets labeled with a mental illness, it's not, well, what were the positive traits, or what were the skills, or what were the gifts, or what were you able to do that you never realized you were able to do, and what might you want to explore moving forward? No, it's just about keeping that whole thing away. And the good is framed as bad because it turned into something bad, but it doesn't mean that those aren't seeds of something to be aware of, to possibly seed one's daily life and life moving forward. So I feel like this whole manual could be translated and remove the taking a psychedelic substance and just put altered states or spiritual emergence, and there are books like that out there. So a type of spiritual emergence, an emergency harm reduction, could be created as well. Page 17 is particularly good. It talks about a small list of possible experiences during psychedelic experiences, like reliving birth, remembering different deaths, reliving accidents, reliving illness, reliving drowning, torture, etc., reliving mystical states, leaving the body and traveling in the spirit realm, identifying with and reliving in detail the victimization of humans throughout history, merging with people, reading their minds, feeling their emotions, being caught in a certain experience, being overwhelmed by feelings or emotions, merging with rocks, animals, plants, and experiencing the pollution and death of the planet and different species. I pretty much experienced all of those things, but without psychedelics. So it's a very similar territory. The main difference is nothing is taken to get there, and it lasts a lot longer. So yeah, 16 to 21, I won't go on too much more about that. It's really good, and now that I'm off medications, I don't know if and when I will re-experience any of that type of altered state. I am taking Hardy Nutritionals micronutrients, and I have been for going on 5 months, and I'm wondering if those types of experiences will come back. And at the same time, I want to work towards creating space for people to go through these experiences. And then I wonder though about that, because I wonder if with proper nutrients, people don't so much go into those non-volitional altered states or involuntary psychedelic experiences. I don't know. I'll know more as time goes on with myself, because generally I have about 6 to 8.5 months between any sort of troubling experience. And right now, I think I'm coming up on 7 months since the major one in January, but I had kind of a minor one in March. So it won't really be until next year that I know if these micronutrients actually prevent it from happening, or is it just that I can be on micronutrients daily instead of lithium and other medications, but the crisis will still happen, and maybe I'll have to take a PRN, or maybe not. Maybe I can get through it. So I still don't know if this prevents crisis, but right now, after being only on the micronutrients for nearly 3 months, it's seeming like I can exist daily on the micronutrients. So we'll see if it prevents crisis. I don't know. So what I'm saying is, I could go around trying to create this space for these experiences, or maybe helping people see that they don't need to be on the meds, because the meds aren't going to stop the experience from reoccurring. That's one thing they don't do. They don't prevent so-called relapse. People have more and more relapses, and I feel like the meds actually contribute to that, because they just block one's ability to meet life, and it's modulated. So then there's a buildup of stress in the background, because it's a modulated way of being. And so all this, it's not dealing with the things that led to that crisis bubbling up in the first place. So as time goes on, and especially being labeled with a mental illness, one is going to have even more stress. And maybe now it's hard to work, and it's hard to do things that one likes. So the stress just bubbles up more and more. So it doesn't really stop that process. Whereas I feel like the micronutrients help to make it so one's nervous system is able to meet life. And it's still challenging, but it's not like certain important elements of information are being completely ignored by virtue of the medications blocking it out. But then still it building up subconsciously, and then it eventually bubbles into the conscious mind. So yeah, that process still might happen with me. I don't know if these micronutrients do the same thing. I don't know if they sort of block meeting challenges, or if I'm able to do things in daily life that is always making the extra stress that might build up subside. And it's stressful for the body to process medications, and now my body's not having to do that. So on the physical, emotional, daily life, movement of life level, I feel like I'm meeting it better. It's still challenging, and I'm actually learning about relationships and things. But then on the chemical and molecular level, my body doesn't have to deal with the stress of the medications and it accumulating in my system, and then not working as well, and then, it needs to be changed to a different poison in order to numb me out because my body's become adapted to that one. So yeah, I'm not sure how it works, and time will show perhaps what is going on there. And I remember something that I heard in the documentary Masks of Madness, where Dr. Abram Hoffer, who was one of the founders of nutrient therapy for mental health, he, I believe, said that 80% of so-called mental illness has a nutritional component or basis to it. And that's a lot. So one could set up 1 million Zendos around the world when maybe we really only need 200,000, because 80% of it could be remedied with some kind of nutrition. And if it were the opposite, if it was 20% nutritional, maybe it's best to set up 1 million Zendos. But if it's 80% nutritional, maybe moving into this nutritional component is important. So I'm just wondering where I want to put my energies for the next part of my life. Do I want to say, we need to set up all these respites, or do I want to say, look, you can live your life without having to take these medications, and you can meet the challenges of life, and you won't have all this stigma and stuff because you're not taking the meds. There'll still be some, for sure. It's difficult to escape all of it, but yeah, so it's probably a bit of both, and yeah, I wonder. And I've been spending a bit of time trying to get organized with everything that I've talked about with myself so far. I typed all the dates and time lengths of my videos into a spreadsheet, and I'm not quite finished, but I did get all the times in, and by doing that, I figured out that I've created 160 hours of video, and that was probably more like 200 hours that got edited down, and it probably took 300 hours to edit all that, and it probably took a couple hundred hours to write all that stuff down, and you know, all the time wandering around thinking where to do the videos and blah blah blah. It's probably, I would say probably 800, and all that I think about it, it's probably 1,000 hours. That's my guesstimate. Maybe less, maybe only 500. I don't know. No, it would be more than 500 for sure. It would have to be at least 700 hours, which is, if I average it out over a year, it's about 14 hours a week. Actually, it has to be more because there's uploading time, and then there's the time that I'm making the titles of the things and fixing the upload, etc. So it probably is at least 1,000 hours. So it's 20 hours a week. This has been a part-time job for me for the last year, so I don't think it's just a hobby. So yeah, I need to get the audios fixed up in order, and then also maybe upload them to SoundCloud, and yeah, get things more ready and still determine whether I need to create a business in the meantime, but do that a little bit later and get organized in the meantime. So these next couple videos, there are a few things that I would like to extrapolate, and whenever I read something, I always find stuff to extrapolate, so it's difficult not to extrapolate, and I wonder how I might go about resolving that, and perhaps realizing that I've proven, if you want to say proven, at least to myself, that this non-ordinary state realm, it's all the same thing, whether one goes there through psychedelics, by doing some kind of volitional act to get into flow, or by non-volitional altered states. It's all very similar territory, but depending on the way it's approached, depending on the way we get there. So if we sit and meditate for 10 hours to get there, then it's flow. If we take a psychedelic to get there, it's a psychedelic experience. If we don't necessarily do anything and maybe we have some trauma and we're stressed in crisis and we go there, well, then it's a mental illness. So it's all, in a way, how it's initiated. But if we get over the fact of how it was initiated and see that there's learning, there's messages, there's something there to inform our daily life moving forward, which one can more easily do if they go into flow through something like meditation or something volitional, because they're volitionally doing something in order to get a state change, to learn something or be more creative or produce something. So we're doing something in order to get something. Psychedelic, we're trying to do something in order to get away, and then sometimes we can see it as a valuable lesson and maybe integrate it, or maybe we're just like, well, I want to feel that great again, so I'm going to take the psychedelic again, which it could be as a way to escape or as a way to learn more for daily life. So there's so many ways to approach it, but when it happens non-volitionally, then it's seen as a mental illness and people get stigmatized and lost, and it's really sad. So I don't know how much more I have to talk about this stuff to myself to prove to myself that it's similar. It's what's beyond the proving stage, proving to myself stage. I don't know, reaching out to people to do something. I don't know what. I really don't. And I say that to myself a lot. And then I just keep making videos, so perhaps that will change after the 1 year mark on September 11th. And in saying all that, I do need to remember as well that I've been off meds for 3 months, and I am, in a way, relearning how to be in the world with a clear nervous system, not modulated by these drugs. So I'm going to feel my relationships differently. I'm going to feel my friends and my family and everything differently. So I am getting reacquainted with that, and that's an important thing to do. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself at the same time and think that I really know something, because I don't. It's starting again from the beginning. In terms of being on meds and going through the system, I had 6 years experience, but I have 3 months experience of being outside the system, being off meds, having a clear nervous system again, and it in a way is a step back because I'm 6 years behind. My nervous system was modulated by meds for 6 years, so it wasn't properly calculating things. And the meds helped me ignore calculating things that calculated to a crisis. So those things may come into awareness now that the meds aren't there. And perhaps in a more embodied way, because being on the meds, it just comes back as more crisis, and then more meds and more this, and it's not really dealing with it. It's dealing with the symptoms, which aren't necessarily symptoms if I can meet things that come up in daily life. It's when I'm not meeting daily life that it accumulates and then turns into a big crisis. And that's likely how it all started. Was there was too much accumulation, I couldn't deal with it, it led to a crisis. But by taking meds, my nervous system's never really able to meet things. So yeah, I have to remember that, to be gentle with myself about my new clear nervous system and reacquainting with that, and feeling strong things sometimes and not thinking, oh, it's getting worse or it's coming back. I don't think that. It just feels strong, and I have to be with that energy and let it pass, and it does if I don't try to escape it or do anything about it.